What's up, guys? Chimp here, and I want to just record a very quick market update here, talking a little bit about where we're at, where I think we're going, given the price action that we've seen in the last few days. So I want to mostly focus on Bitcoin. I'm actually going to make this one. I probably say every video I'm going to make it pretty short, but I'm going to make this one actually really is going to be on the shorter end. And I think fundamentally there's sort of two forces that are sort of competing here. One is this accumulation sort of, I'm not going to draw it very well, but basically this accumulation TWAP zone, which is all these dips are getting bought, all these higher lows are getting bought, basically every dip's getting slammed, and so typically when I see this structure, it's actually very bullish. It's there's some underlying mega flows running below the surface, and from my experience, when you see something like this, it typically leads to continuation. I'm going to show what I mean by this. So, and context matters here, right? So what is the context here? The context is we had a very sharp pump from 85 to 94K with almost no no ability for people to get long. And so new longs have basically had to enter here. And actually, let me pull up something on my other monitor here real quick, just to confirm. So the question is when you have this initial pump, and I talked about this in my last video, who's left to sell? And typically, there's actually not that many people left to sell, especially when you initially have these sort of pumps, which is why typically being bullish in these sort of context-driven pumps, in the context of a sharp move up coming out of a multi-month downtrend, or coming out of a multi-month compression, right? You could draw the same sort of box, sort of in reverse, right? Again, it's not exactly perfect, but you sort of get the idea. You have this compression that breaks, and you have this situation where okay, no one is really long after 3 months of down only, after all these sellers coming in and pushing price down and pushing price down. And so when the market pops and starts to grind higher, it really starts to grind higher and eventually pops up. I'll show you guys one other example of this. If I'm able to load it on my chart, maybe this is going back a bit. But if you look at the price action leading up to late 2023, we ended up having this compression zone, right? And you could call it 30K or whatever. And when we finally broke it and popped up, we had this very similar what do they call it? Bullish accumulation, where it's prices grinding up, grinding up, grinding up. You have these micro pullbacks, right? In this situation, we had these sort of micro pullbacks, you have some smaller ones, and then you have some bigger ones, and maybe you have some faster ones. And so forth. And then you end up actually getting a second leg up. And so the question is now that we're here, what's next? And so I'll play the bullish advocate case first, and then I'll sort of give the bearish one. So I think the bullish one here is you've had this vertical accumulation. Meanwhile, the question you kind of have to ask yourself is are other coins looking frothy, or are they sort of looking weak? Because if there's broad froth across the board, that's actually sort of a risk factor. But when you look at some of these coins, Fartcoin, for example, it's trading at 125. Now it's back at $1 when Bitcoin's at its highs. You look at something like a Solana. Solana's at 147, but it's trading as high as almost 160, 157. You look at something like a Trump, right? Some of these coins that had initial large impulses, Trump pumped all the way up above 16, and now it's back at 11. So taking all of these sort of into account, I think the odds are more likely that basically what's happened here is the market pumped, people got long alts and Bitcoin, and the altcoin traders have sort of been getting washed out, but Bitcoin has had this underlying accumulation that's been going on, which is why it's more bullish. Now let me give the bearish case real quick. So and by the way, if I'm bullish here, sort of what am I thinking? I'm thinking obviously you've had like people selling in 98s or whatever. I think like you go up and you break 100. So like, well, whether that's all-time high or whether that's 102 or 104, like it's hard to say, but I think odds are more likely than not. Like this 100 level is like just asking to get hunted. Okay, so now let me give the bearish argument or things I'd look for on the bearish side. One, there's like a microstructure phenomenon that I noticed here, which is you're getting this situation where you're printing these higher lows, and like typically in the past when you get a structure print like this, eventually you just go and take them out. But I've noticed like that sometimes these have actually been pretty predictive of like low time frame dumps. So like let me show you a great example of this. A good example of this was like right before we dumped to 74K, we got a bunch of these higher low prints, and like you get these impulses down, sharp moves back up, but you'd always print a higher low. So like we're seeing a little bit of that here. What would I look for to become bearish? Like one would be if we start sort of drifting back towards here. Like I think that might be not a great sign. Two would be like, and actually this would be the most bearish sort of like price action thing I'd look for, is like if you start getting these sharp dumps, like let's say we dump to 95 and we auto wick back up to like 97, we print a like lower high, and then like we chop around and we print a lower high, like chop around, and then sharp drop down, and another lower high. Like that to me would be like, okay, a dump is like pretty imminent. I don't know if we're close to that yet in terms of like a signal. I still lean towards like we're gonna pump, just given all the other factors, but that's something to look for. So if I see something like that, I'll publish a new video. For now, I'm leaning like 75% bullish. I think there's a chance we dump out here, but I think it's on the lower end. But we'll see what happens. I promise to keep this video shorter. This is only 7 minutes long, so stick to my promise. Again, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think. I have the ETH BTC video I'm going to publish at some point. I haven't had the time yet, so hopefully if I have the time in the next few days, I'll end up publishing that. But anyways, guys, until next time, take care.